Doing?
Good morning, John. I'm all right.
You said last week you didn't mind Watson running the ball as long as he was careful. He ran 8 more times Sunday. How imperative is it that he run the ball to help your running game?
Well, I think the plays that we call where he runs, he has a choice. He doesn't have to run. Sometimes he can throw the ball to the guy in the flat and let that guy run, which he did a couple times. Other times, if they are covered, that means that there's some space on the inside, and then he can pull it down and run. Or if the guy turns and blocks for him, then he can run to the sideline, and have a chance to turn up the sideline and step out of bounds. So it's not a called quarterback run. There are options involved in the play.
Romeo, also, why is it this year with all 5 of your linemen back that your guys' running game has been so bad compared to last season?
Oh, well, I attribute it to this, that we did not have the offseason, and then we did not have the preseason, and those are games where guys get an opportunity to work together, to get a feel for each other, and I think missing those helped the development of that unit, and so we're still trying to develop to a degree, and so that's what I attribute it to.
Aaron Wilson.
Hey, good morning, Romeo.
Good morning.
Romeo, when you look at their offense, they run the football an inordinate amount of times compared to most NFL teams. What are some of the special challenges of defending them? And just if you could talk about, in particular, Newton's running ability and what you see from Damian Harris, his skills as a back.
Well, I'll tell you, Newton, he's a big individual. And when he decides to run, he runs like a running back. Many quarterbacks try to avoid contact when they run, but he almost like he seeks it, particularly if it's a defensive back who's trying to tackle him. He'll just put his shoulder down and run over him, So that mentality from a quarterback makes it a little bit more difficult, because most of the time you're treating a quarterback like a quarterback, and you almost have to have those golden gloves when you deal with a quarterback. Now Harris, he is a really good runner. He runs downhill. He runs with effort. He breaks tackles, and he's one guy that you have to tackle. You just cannot whoosh him down. So depending on who's doing the tackling, you might have to have more than one guy there to get him down. And so I think the combination of all of their backs that they use, because they all have unique abilities, and they all run hard though. And so that stable of backs that he got, he's using them to his best advantage. And so that makes the running game more difficult, that the quarterback can run. And then I think these offensive linemen that they got, they're doing a pretty decent job of getting on people, cutting people off to create space for the runner.
Romeo, now that you guys have officially activated Jacob, what kind of role do you foresee for him, and how much do you feel like that gives you a boost as far as pass rush, what he can do? Thank you.
Well, I think that really helps us, because we're down at the outside linebacker spot. We're light in numbers there. So having him available helps our depth, if nothing else. Not that he will be a depth player, but it helps our numbers there. All right. And then we know that in sub situations that he is a pass rusher who has to be dealt with. And so I think that his role will continue to be what it's been, and then maybe more pass rush opportunities.
Sarah.
Romeo, how important is it to spend the rest of the season figuring out what young talent on this team can make significant contributions moving forward?
Well, I think the most important thing for me is to try to win games. And I know we're not winning games, but we're going to try to win games. And I don't know if we've noticed, but there have been young guys who've been playing defense a little bit. And I don't hear much talk about those guys at this moment, and so they are still learning. I say this all the time, that young players, particularly rookies, they don't know what they don't know, and they have to get into the games and try to figure some stuff out. And that's where you have to do it. I mean, on the practice field, you can see some things on the practice field, but the game tempo is where these young players learn the most. And so you put them in the game, and then you see what they do. Now, putting them in the game is an issue with me a lot of times, depending on who you got in front of them, all right? And then how do you get them in the game, and then how they do when they go in the game, and that determines if they get back in the game. So, it's a line that you have to walk when you're talking about young players.
Who are some of those young defensive players that you were talking about that have stood out to you so far?
Well, Ross Blackledge, he's got great ability. He's got great talent, and he's learning to play with his talent better. Outside linebacker, all right, we got from Florida. He is a good player, got good strength, got good size, all right, but he's still learning as well. And, so we threw him in there a couple weeks ago, and he had to play defense and special teams and all of that, and he's improving, and he's going to get more playing time because we don't have any outside linebackers, and so you got a chance to take a look at him and decide whether he can be a player or not, because he's going to be out there. And then Ross, he's been out there, and he's going to be out there because we don't have that many defensive linemen, and we got a little rotation because those guys wear down, as the game goes on. So those are two guys on the defense that you can look at and make a determination about, are they going to be players or not, or can they help the team or not? Now, offensively, it's a little bit different deal. We got a young receiver. We think he has talent, but is he better than Fuller? All right. Is he better than Cooks? Is he better than Cobb? Not at this point in time, so I might not find out whether he can be a player in the game, so that's part of the things. And same thing with the offensive tackle. I think he has great talent. He's got length. He's a hard worker, and he's a willing guy. And I think that he's going to be a good player. All right. A lot of times offensive linemen take a little time. They don't, unless they're super, they don't jump out at you and you're going to put them in the game and they're going to be a great player. I mean, I've seen great players in this league, okay? For instance, at the quarterback position, I've seen Manning when he came into the league and he got hammered the first half of his season. I saw Troy Aikman got hammered, all right, his first year. But they made it through that first year, and then they became really good players, okay? And so now that's the quarterback position, and I think that position carries a little bit more weight than some of the other positions we're talking about. But young players, we got them on the team because we feel good about them. They have talent, but that talent has to grow and develop. And then when we feel like the time is right, then we'll put them in there and give them that opportunity to get better as they go along.
Jason Bristol.
Good morning, Romeo. With 7 games left, certainly a lot can happen, but would you like to coach this team past this season?
I'm worried about this game. I'm going to see if I can coach this team this game and see if I can get a win. And then at the end of the season, we will sit down and we will talk and make decisions about what the future holds.
Thank you.
Seth, I feel like that was your question because you laughed.
Yeah, that was my question, but I'll ask this one. Romeo, I'll give you advice because that was the only – Jason stole my question. I talked to him about it Sunday night and he stole it. My advice to you, Ross Blacklock, he's dropping his helmet, which is ending up with him on the ground. Go old school. Make him practice without a helmet. The NFLPA will hate you for it, but I promise you it'll fix it so fast.
Hey, I'm inclined to agree with you there. If he has to take that helmet off, he'll keep that head up.
He's doing. I see what you're doing. I mean, he's. Where do you assess him right now compared to maybe where he was at the beginning of the year? Because the athleticism is obvious, but there's just a few technical things that it looks like are keeping him from really growing.
Well, that's true, and he's getting better at that. He's gotten better from when he first started to this point. And if he continues to get better and grow, which I think he will, because when you're in these games, you get a chance to go against different blocking styles and different style players, and you begin to learn and understand how you need to play them. Keep your head up, use your hands, push the upfield shoulder, those kind of things which enable you to be a good player. And then when you can create the space for yourself, use that natural ability that he has.
Aaron Reese.
Hey, Romeo, back on the topic of Deshaun running, if he doesn't run a ton, but he runs just a few times a game, what kind of impact does that have on just the numbers game from a defensive perspective, matching up front when the opponent is trying to run?
Well, anytime, you have a running quarterback who can run and is efficient at running, that means you got to put another guy down in the box to handle it, and so in doing that, sometimes that opens up the passing game for you. It opens up the play action game because you got to have another guy down, because if you don't have the guy down there, then he can run and he'll gain yards.
DP.
Good morning, Romeo. Y'all activated CJ Procise to the 53 last Sunday. So where do you foresee his role now moving forward, both on special teams and on offense?
Well, you know what? We used him as a kickoff returner, and I thought he did a decent job on the return that he had. And so I think he'll continue in that role. He's been catching some punts, but I don't know if he's ready to do that, yet. But he's a backup running back, and he's a kickoff returner right now.
And then Sunday, a salute to service game. And I know you've talked about it before that your dad was in the Army. Can you give us a little bit of background on your dad, how long he served, where he served, what his rank was, and what it means to you every year when you do have a salute to service game as you go back out there and you remember people like your dad who served?
Well, he was a career Army guy. He retired after 26 years of service, and he kind of served all over the place. We moved around quite a bit. We started off, I remember that I started school in Oklahoma, back to Virginia, here in Texas, Fort Hood, Fort Knox, Kentucky. When he went overseas, he was in Korea, he was in Vietnam, and at those times we didn't go because we were staying at home. Because those were conflicts involved at that time. But as a military guy, he ran the household like the military sergeant that he was. He's the first sergeant, and he ran the house like we were his platoon, and everybody had assignments. He would check to make sure that you did them, and they had to be exactly right. And he would go under stuff, over stuff, through stuff to make sure you did it right. And then if you happen to be in the bed sleep when he was inspecting, he would come wake you up and show you what you missed, and then boom, you had to clean it right away. So some of the discipline involved and responsibility, a lot of those things I learned from him and took from him.
We'll take about three more. Brandon Scott.
I love that story about your dad, Romeo. My grandfather was the same way. I wanted to ask you about some of your older players, some of your more experienced players. How do you feel like they're making the adjustment to being older players? And what is that adjustment like? And how much of a conversation piece is that for you guys as coaches with them?
Well, I can't speak to being older. I'm still pretty young. No, I tell you, I think that players, they know their game, they know their bodies, and they know what they can and can't do. And as they get older, sometimes you lose a step of speed. And so if you're a DB, defensive back, rather than coming up and challenge them, particularly those fast guys, you play off those guys. And so now they have to try to run at you and try to figure out what you're going to do and where you're going to be. And so you begin to use that experience and knowledge that you have to help you get your job done and then help you win those particular plays. So that's what I see about veteran guys who are getting older. They use their knowledge and experience to help them perform on the field, even though they might not be as quick as they used to be or as fast as they used to be, but they still can produce because they have the knowledge.
Wax.
Romeo, you were talking about the running game earlier and how not having the preseason games, obviously you feel like that impacted the group negatively. After having 5 weeks together, once Senio took over and really the rest of the group's been intact all year, why not improvement over the, all the weeks you have been on the field together and all the regular season games that they have played together as a unit?
Well, every game plan is a different game plan. And so sometimes you're blocking gap schemes, sometimes you're blocking zone schemes. And so it's a different technique involved in all of those. I think the guys are a unified group. They feel good about each other. They try to get it done. But sometimes those guys who are across from you, they make a difference about how well you can do your job. And so we've played against some pretty good guys across from us this season, and so that has impacted us. They play hard, and like we go to Tennessee and have a chance to win. We had a chance to win last week, and so I don't say that they're dirt or anything like that. But these guys are football players and they can play the game. It just hasn't worked out for us this year.
Last one for Cody Davis.
Good morning, Coach. If David Johnson is good to go on Sunday, do you project we will see more time with him and Duke Johnson splitting time in the backfield versus what we saw in the first half of the season?
Yeah, I believe so. I think if he's ready to go, you'll see more of a, let's say, 50-50 split, because anytime a guy is coming off an injury too, you're worried about him a little bit. So you want to try to help him and get through the game. So I can see both of those guys splitting time.
Sorry, we'll go last one for Aaron.
Thank you. Hey, Romeo, when you look at both these teams, I would say every year is different, but are you surprised to see you and the Patriots in the situation to both have losing records at this stage of the year and just kind of, with franchises that have a tradition for winning and being in the playoffs? Thank you.
Well, yeah, yes, I am. I'm surprised. In New England's situation, I think the quarterback made a big difference for them and he has made a big difference for them for a long time, and so not having him and they have to break in a new quarterback. He's got to learn the system. And so they're not as smooth as they used to be, but they're working toward it, and I think probably that may be one of the reasons that they're running the ball more, as well as having capable guys to do that job. I think with us, I think the expectations were so high for us. And then when we went through that gauntlet that we went through at the beginning of the year and didn't have much success, now then the questions become about what's wrong, why, coaching change, and now everybody's worried about their future, their family's future, and so sometimes the focus is not quite the same as when you're winning and everybody in the locker room is on the same page and they're not worried about being traded and all this stuff that goes along when you're a losing team.
Thanks for the time, Romeo.
All right.